So which should you get first, Skirk's signature weapon or her constellations? In this video I'll be going through all of them, her weapon refinements, and her constellations. I'll be explaining what they do and what benefits they can give you, the damage increase for each one of them with numbers, and then finally I'll give you the right whaling path for Skirk. Should you go for the weapon first, for C2 first, and the weapon and stuff like that. But if you're trying to get Skirk's constellations, I'd recommend checking out LD Shop. It's a cheap, fast, and secure game top-up website where you can get Genesis crystals 15% cheaper or more. Check it out from the link in the description or the pinned comment. But yeah, starting off with Skirk's signature weapon, Azurelight. That sword is going to have 674 base attack at level 90 with a 22% crit rate substat, which is pretty good. The passive on that weapon is going to be pretty simple. You're going to have your attack increase by 24%. It's just a flat increase. And then when you have 0 energy, which Skirk can have, all the time, your attack is going to be further increased by 24% and your crit damage is going to be increased by 40%. That means in total, this weapon is going to give you a 674 base attack, which is high, 22% crit rate, 48% attack, and 40% crit damage, which is huge for any character overall, especially with Skirk. With her high scalings, she likes attack and stuff like that. This weapon is going to be super huge. Getting Azurelight is usually going to result in a 16 to 30% damage increase over her usual weapons. It will be more around like 16%, 20% to 22% for her other high-end weapons, for example, the Haran Gippaku, the Mist Splitter, and stuff like that. And it can hit a max of 30% for the free-to-play R5 Finale of the Deep. So yeah, even from the top weapons, it's going to be a pretty significant increase with 16%, which is pretty good. It's definitely a good value weapon overall. With refinements, with each refinement, you're going to gain 12% attack and a 10% damage increase. And that's going to result in around like an 8% damage increase per each refinement. So yeah, that's pretty much it for a weapon. It's a 16 to 30% damage increase depending on what weapon you have before. And for refinements, it's an 8% damage increase for each refinement, which is still high for your usual signature weapons. Even the refinements are going to be pretty good. Now, moving on to Skirk's constellations, we're just going to explain them easily one by one, then I'll tell you guys how much damage increase you're going to gain from each constellation, at least like roughly. But yeah, starting off with C1. So C1 is basically just going to enhance your passive. It's basically that every time you absorb the Void Rifts, which are the thingies created from when your teammates deal Hydra or Cryo damage, you can have up to 3. Every time you have one of them, Skirk is going to deal 500% of her attack as a Cryo hit counted as charge attacks damage. So in total, that's going to be a 1500% multiplier nuke that Skirk can just get by absorbing her thingies. Also, this is going to be AoE damage, so it's going to help her a lot with AoE against multiple enemies, which is pretty good. But yeah, this is just extra damage basically, but it's going to have a huge multiplier to the point where it is actually going to matter a lot. It's going to be a great constellation just for it to increase your damage. It's simply just extra damage. You don't have to do anything. You just need to absorb your 3 thingies. Obviously, you'll need to have the Cryo and Hydra teammates for you to be able to create the thingies for you to absorb them. But when you do, Skirk is just going to automatically deal extra damage, huge amounts of extra damage. A 500% multiplier is going to be huge, and you can do it up to 3 times or even more maybe in the rotation with her normal attacks. So yeah, overall C1 is going to result in around a 25% damage increase. Obviously, with the right team, you're going to need 3 either Cryo or Hydra teammates for you to be able to create the Wild Rift thingies for you to absorb. Without that, obviously it's not going to be as much of an increase. But for usual Skirk teams, for the right team, it's going to result in around a 25% damage increase. It's just going to be extra damage. So yeah, it's going to be a pretty good constellation for sure, especially for C1. Now, C2 is just basically just going to enhance your Serpent subtly stacks or points. When you hold her elemental skill, you're going to gain 10 additional stacks. And it's also going to give you 10 additional stacks to the maximum stack so you can buff your elemental burst with. Also, when you're in Skirk's main DPS mode, when you can normal attack, the mode from your elemental skill, your attack is going to be increased by a huge 70%, which is going to be super huge, by the way. So yeah, that's a crazy constellation. In total, it's going to allow you to increase your elemental burst damage and then have an extra 70% attack while you're in your main DPS mode. Usually this is going to result in around a 26% damage increase, which is pretty huge. That's 26% on top of the 25% from C1. This damage increase is more roughly calculated though, because obviously it's going to depend on what gear you have, your artifacts and stuff like that. The main damage increase you're getting is going to be the 70% attack, and that's going to depend on what value attack is going to hold for Skirk. If you already had like many attack substats, for example, it's going to be a little less. If you didn't, obviously it's going to be a little more and stuff like that. But yeah, but in general, a 26% damage increase is going to be where it's at, which is super huge. Now, C3 is going to increase the level and multipliers of your elemental bursts. That's not really going to matter as much. It's probably going to be like a 1% damage increase for a normal, on-field normal attacks, charge attacks, main DPS Skirk. It's not going to matter as much, but it can be good for a burst DPS Skirk. For burst DPS Skirk, it can be up to like a 20% damage increase if you're using Skirk as a burst DPS specifically. But in general, for a main DPS normal play Skirk, it's not going to matter. It's going to be a 1%, damage increase. Now, C4 is just going to enhance your passive return to Oblivion. Each Death Crossing stack is also going to increase your attack by 10, 20, or 40%. Obviously, for this, you're going to need to have the Cryo or Hydra teammates too for it to work. But yeah, if you use this Constellation fully, you're going to gain a 40% attack increase, which is super huge. Now, this is the point where attack increase is going to start reaching some diminishing returns, at least slightly. So this Constellation is probably going to result in around like a 9% damage increase overall. Again, this can be higher if, say, for example, you don't have that much attack on your artifacts. You can maybe benefit more from the attack you're getting from the C4, but in general, attack here is going to reach diminishing returns a little bit, especially if you already have your signature weapon too and stuff like that. It's not going to be a huge constellation, that's for sure. But moving on to C5. C5 is just a level increase. It's going to increase the level of your elemental skill, but that's going to be one of the most impactful level increases since it does increase Skirk's multipliers for elemental skill. And this is like basically your whole damage, obviously for a normal attack Skirk. So those 3 levels are going to result in quite a bit of damage. It's going to be around the 12% damage increase, which is super good for a level constellation. That's for sure. Because as I said, all of your damage is going to be concentrated towards your elemental skill talent. Your multipliers are going to be there. So the damage increase is going to be pretty significant for a level constellation. So yeah, C5 is going to be around a 12% damage increase, which is super good. And now finally C6, when she absorbs her Void Rifts, you're going to gain a new type of stacks called the Havoc Seaver stacks. And they basically just give her more damage in all scenarios. They're just going to initiate like coordinated attacks, which is basically just extra damage. That can happen when you use your elemental burst. It's going to be good for a burst DPS Skirk too. It can happen when you use your normal attack, so it can work for a normal attack Skirk. And yeah, in general, they're going to have huge multipliers. It's going to be 750% multiplier for this attack when you use your elemental burst, and 180% per attack when you use your normal attacks. So it's going to be a huge damage increase, but also it can be triggered when you take damage. It's going to reduce your damage taken by 80% and then also unleash your attack. So you're not going to lose out on anything, but it's going to reduce your damage by 80%. So it's going to give you a huge survivability boost too, which is pretty good. In general, C6 is not going to be that crazy. It's going to be around a 22% damage increase. Again, depends on your playstyle a little bit. It's going to be a little more if you're using her as a burst DPS specifically, but in general, for a normal Skirk, it's going to be around a 22% damage increase, which is super good, but it's not going to be like a crazy C6 where it's going to like fully transform her or something like that, but it's going to be pretty good. But now for the actual final conclusion, how should you wish for Skirk? So yeah, these are the damage increase tables you're seeing right now. As you guys can see, I like her constellations increase. It's pretty distributed. It's not like one of those where a lot of her constellations are useless and then one of them is going to increase her damage by like 45% for like C6 and stuff like that. It's pretty well distributed, which is pretty good. Her weapon is also going to be one of the biggest damage increases we've seen from signature weapons overall. So it's also pretty good. But the roadmap I would recommend is going to be this. The first priority is going to be R1 or C1. And in my opinion, they're going to be at the same priority depending on what you have. If you already have a great weapon, like an S tier weapon for her, for example, the Primordial Jade, the Harengepiku, the Mistsplitter, maybe in that case, you probably should go for C1 first. It's going to result in more damage increase than her Refinement 1 weapon. But if you don't and you're using like a subpar weapon or the free-to-play Finale of the Deep, for example, then in that case, getting her signature weapon is probably going to have more value. So C1, R1 are going to depend on what weapon you already have right now. But yeah, after getting the first thing, obviously you'd want to go for whatever you didn't get. So if you got R1, the next thing you'd want to get is C1, obviously. And then if you got C1, obviously you'd want to go for R1. Those two are going to be at the same priority. Which of them you get first depends on what weapon you already have. That's basically it. After that, I would probably just recommend going for Constellations, honestly, because usually you'll get more damage increases, as you guys can see from the Constellations, than the weapon refinements, and obviously they're also cheaper. So I'll definitely just recommend going for the Constellations up to C6. Every Constellation you get is going to be a decent damage increase, except for like C3 maybe, depending on what playstyle you're going to be playing her in. So yeah, definitely would recommend just going for Constellations first. And then after that, you can go for the weapon refinements. Obviously, they're not bad. I wouldn't say they're worth it, but they're definitely good weapon refinements. You're getting a huge amount of attack and crit for each refinement, so yeah, they're also pretty good. So yeah, this is what I personally think is the best roadmap for you to wish for Skirk. Tell me how you guys wish in the comments. How are you getting her? Like C0, R0, C0, R1, C1, whatever. Just let me know. Guys, leave a like, subscribe to the channel. See you guys in the next video. Peace.